Before Amazon, shopping meant real stores, real people, and real memories. Let's go back to the days of squeaky carts, handwritten receipts, and that mall smell you'll never forget. Department stores. Department stores used to feel like whole little cities under one roof. You'd step inside those multi-floor palaces and suddenly the afternoon was gone. Wandering past racks of clothes, shiny furniture displays, and toy aisles that seemed to go on forever. Some even had full restaurants tucked on the top floors where a slice of pie and a cup of coffee were part of the adventure. Back then, when we did this and strolled through those big stores, you had to be ready with your walking shoes, because shopping meant moving, not scrolling. There was a kind of magic in the escalators, the window displays, and the way everything felt grand and important. No prime account, no one-click delivery, just the thrill of seeing things in person, touching them, trying them on. It was a social outing too. You'd bump into neighbors, old friends, or cousins doing the same thing. Looking back, it wasn't just shopping, it was an experience that made an ordinary Saturday feel like a special event. Malls in their prime. In the 80s and 90s, the mall was more than a place to shop. It was the center of our weekends. The glow of neon lights reflected off shiny floors, while the smell of hot pretzels drifted through the air. Music blasted from record stores, pulling us in to flip through rows of cassette tapes and CDs. Back then, when we did this and spent hours wandering the mall, you had to be ready for the long stroll. It wasn't about clicks, it was about steps. The food court was its own adventure, with trays of pizza slices, sodas, and endless chatter. Friends would meet up, laugh, and sometimes even catch a movie before heading back to window shop again. It wasn't just shopping, it was the heartbeat of youth culture, a place where memories were made. Grocery shopping. Before supermarkets turned into one-stop giants, grocery shopping was a little journey through town. You'd stop by the butcher for fresh cuts, swing by the baker for a warm loaf, and finish at the produce stand with whatever was in season. Each shopkeeper knew your name, asked about your family, and sometimes slipped you a little something extra if they liked you. Back when we did this, you had to be prepared. It wasn't a quick trip. It was an afternoon of errands and conversations. The air smelled of fresh bread, sawdust on butcher floors, and ripe peaches stacked in wooden crates. Kids tagged along, hoping for a free cookie or a slice of bologna at the counter. It was slower, friendlier, and somehow more personal than pushing a cart through endless aisles. Looking back, it wasn't just shopping, it was part of the rhythm of daily life, stitched into the heart of the community. Toy stores. Walking into a toy store back then felt like stepping into another world. The shelves stretched to the ceiling, packed with board games, dolls, action figures, and bikes gleaming under bright lights. The aisles buzzed with kids tugging at their parents' sleeves, wide-eyed at the latest craze. When we did this and wandered those stores, you had to be ready. It was overwhelming in the best way, like Christmas morning waiting around every corner. The smell of fresh plastic and cardboard boxes mixed with the sound of jingling toys being tested. Sure, Amazon might give you endless options today, but it can't hand you the thrill of picking up a toy, shaking the box, and imagining the fun. Parents sometimes hid gifts under their coats, while kids dreamed out loud about what might show up under the tree. Looking back, toy stores weren't just shops. They were magical playgrounds of possibility. Bookstores. Before e-readers and next-day delivery, a trip to the bookstore was an experience in itself. You'd wander slowly through the aisles, pulling books from the shelves just to feel the weight of them in your hands. The smell of fresh ink and paper hung in the air, making the whole place feel alive. Staff picks and handwritten notes taped to the shelves guided you, not some faceless algorithm. Back when we did this, you had to be prepared to lose track of time because one glance at the shelves could turn into an entire afternoon. The soft hush of pages turning and the quiet murmur of other readers created its own kind of music. Maybe you left with just one book, maybe with a stack, but either way it felt like a treasure hunt. Looking back, bookstores weren't only about buying books, they were sanctuaries for curiosity, imagination, and escape. Record shops. Buying music once meant holding music in your hands. You'd flip through rows of vinyl or CDs, admiring the album art almost as much as the songs inside. The shop had its own rhythm. Posters on the walls, the faint crackle of a record spinning, and music spilling out onto the street. Back when we did this, you had to be prepared to spend an hour or two just browsing because discovering music was half the fun. The guy behind the counter always had opinions, sometimes sharp, sometimes spot on, but those conversations felt like part of the price of admission. Picking out a record wasn't just a transaction, it was a ritual, a statement about who you were. Spotify might give you 1,000,000 songs on demand, but it can't hand you the thrill of peeling the shrink wrap or dropping a needle for the first time. Looking back, record shops weren't just stores. They were temples of sound and culture. Catalog shopping. Catalog shopping was its own kind of magic. You'd flip through the thick Sears or JCPenney book, circling toys, gadgets, and clothes with a pen like you were building your future. Back when we did this, you had to be patient. Orders took weeks, not hours, and you were always prepared for the wait. But that anticipation made it sweeter as each day brought you closer to the knock at the door. The catalog itself felt like a treasure chest, sitting heavy on the coffee table with dog-eared pages from all the dreaming. Families would gather around it pointing, debating, and making wish lists together. Sure, today we tap Add to Cart with a finger, but that catalog was the original shopping cart. Looking back, it wasn't just about buying things, it was about imagining the possibilities that lived on every page. Farmers markets. Farmers markets once felt like the heartbeat of a town. Stalls overflowed with fresh produce, baskets of corn, and jars of homemade jams that tasted like summer in a spoonful. Back when we did this, you had to be prepared for a slow Saturday morning because shopping also meant chatting with neighbors and swapping recipes. There was no buy now button, just a smile, a handshake, and maybe a free sample of peaches or cheese. The air carried the mix of ripe fruit, baked bread, and laughter drifting between stands. Kids tugged at their parents' hands, hoping for kettle corn or a lemonade. Every bag you carried home felt like more than groceries. It was part of a shared ritual, rooted in community. Looking back, farmers markets weren't just about food, they were about connection, tradition, and the simple joy of slowing down. Flea markets and thrift shops. Flea markets and thrift shops were never about looking polished, they were about the thrill of the hunt. Tables and racks overflowed with oddities, bargains, and treasures you didn't even know you needed until you spotted them. Back when we did this, you had to be prepared to dig, because half the fun was in the searching, not the finding. Every trip came with surprises. Maybe a vintage jacket, maybe a lamp that reminded you of Grandma's house. The air buzzed with chatter, haggling, and the smell of popcorn or hot dogs from a nearby stand. You left with bags in your hands, but also with stories to tell. The seller you bargained with, the item you almost bought, the laugh you shared with a stranger. Unlike today's curated feeds, these places were messy, unpredictable, and full of life. Looking back, flea markets and thrift shops weren't just about stuff, they were adventures waiting to be uncovered.